Oops. Okay. I was going to give you a case study of one of my informants who was a Christian scientist growing up. When I was in Rocamadour, which is my main place of research, I ran into a lot of, as I've mentioned, Wiccans and neo-pagans and stuff. And one of these women, I'll call Lena, that wasn't her name, but she was a woman in her early 30s, and she had come to Rocamadour when she was suicidal in her late teens or early 20s. I think it was her early 20s, and she told me about how the experience of sitting in the chapel in front of the Black Virgin of Rocamadour, she just felt soothed and went into a state of meditation, and it really changed her life. She told me, though, that she had been raised as a Christian Scientist, and her family discouraged all interest or questions about any kind of medical stuff because they felt that an interest in the way the outside world, well, the rest of the world, sees medicine would cause people to be more likely to believe themselves to be sick. So when she was in second grade, her family was driving, they passed a hospital. She asked what the building was, and she was told that it was a hospital, but, not to worry about it, it wouldn't affect her. A couple weeks later, she developed appendicitis, and her family worked with a Christian Science practitioner to try to get her to realize that her appendix was not about to rupture, that she was not ill. From a perspective of a scientist, this was very dangerous because it was really putting her life in danger. And if your appendix bursts, it basically sprays bacteria all over your internal organs, and it's very difficult to clean that up, and they start to destroy those organs, and it's a terrible infection. In any case, she didn't get better, and eventually even the practitioner said, "I think she's going to die, take her to the hospital," so they did. The hospital staff were able to save her life, but her family, especially her father, was very angry at her because it was something that they understood that she had brought on herself. And one of the things she told me that really affected her was her second grade class all sent get well cards, and her father destroyed them without letting her see them. And this turned her away from Christianity in her life. And one of the reasons why she was more interested in something like Wicca was this idea of a warm mother that would embrace her, as opposed to the cold father. You could do all kinds of psychological things about her father and the idea of God the Father. Anyway, I thought that in itself was pretty interesting. And she, that idea that you can deny your children medical treatment, that's one of the things in the United States that has caused some problems. What is the right of the child? What is the right to religion? And so there's some arguments, if my child is dying, do I have a right to religion, or do I have a right, am I required to save that child's life? Jehovah's Witnesses are another group. They will have medical attention in some cases, but one of the things that they won't do, because of a passage in the Bible I don't have with me, is they won't accept transfusions. And since so many people's lives are saved because they've had a loss of blood by transfusions, there have been also cases where kids have been denied transfusions by people stating a right to religion and have died. And so this is a huge problem in the U.S., trying to figure out the protection of children versus your right to your religious beliefs. And it's kind of tricky. All right, I'm going to look at my notes here, sort of. I've got like a chapter of Bowen open somewhere on this page so I can see what I'm doing here. Okay, sorcery, witchcraft, and modernity. Witchcraft, hugely common idea, ties once again to this idea of control and people being able to do things to you. Often anthropologists will distinguish between witchcraft, which doesn't have to be intentional the way that it's used, the term is used in Africa, and sorcery, which does imply intent. One of the classic ideas about witchcraft, or classic ethnographic studies about witchcraft, was done by a guy named E. Evans Pritchard, very British, early 20th century, who did work among a group of people called the Azande, A-Z-A-N-D-E, and Bowen talks about them. They believe that bad things happen to people just like we do. If your wall collapses and it falls on your head, maybe it was poor construction, maybe it was termites, it could be something like that. But they add an element that we in the West tend not to, which was, what is that fate? What caused that to happen then? I think people in the West, especially if they're religious, well, it was that person's time. You know, if they were just walking down the street and a coconut fell out of a tree and hit them on the head and knocked them out, well, what can you do about that? It was destiny. That's one of the ways we understand that. On the other hand, for the Azande, their question would be, okay, coconuts fall out of the tree all the time, walls fall down sometimes. Why did it happen when this person was sitting there? And the argument then is somebody else is responsible, and that person is a witch. A witch causes coincidences to happen, negative coincidences. Witches among the Azande are not intentionally wrongdoers. They are people who have bad thoughts about others, but they have a substance in their, it's often said their large intestines, called mangu. And mangu is kind of, it reacts to bad thoughts the way a magnifying glass can react to a shaft of sunlight. It intensifies it. It makes it dangerous. And so if you have mangu in your system and you think, oh, that guy cut me off in traffic. Ah, I hate his guts. Or she won't ever stop talking. She's so annoying. That can cause, if you have this mangu in your system, and apparently it gets worse as you get older, to allow coincidences to happen so that that person is likely to be harmed. And so if this happens to somebody, there is a study of people in the population. You know, they'll do kind of an inquest to figure out who was not on good terms with the person who was injured or died or had whatever else bad happen to them. And everybody talks about it. They talk about their feelings about that person, whether they had any disagreements. It's a little bit like the Jerry Springer show, where all of these emotions come out. And E. Evans Pritchard thought that this was actually very healthy for a population. Once they have a few suspects who might be responsible for it, they do a divination. And divination is anything that you would do to try to determine unknown information. It's often about the future. Like if you ever did that thing where you twist an apple stem while reciting the alphabet, and when the stem pops off, that letter is supposed to be the name of your future husband. I don't know if boys do this, or wife, I guess. I don't know, whatever. Or, you know, you put a piece of wedding cake under your pillow and you'll dream about the person. These kinds of things are divination. Why they're about getting married, my examples, that's what I ran into when I was a kid. So, any case, what they do is they feed a naturally occurring poison known as benge, B-E-N-G-E, to a chicken. And it's strychnine, and it occurs in nature, and you will prepare this. But some are very strong because of the plant, and some are weaker. It just depends on the plant. That's kind of the luck of the draw. And when you give this to a chicken, if the chicken dies, that means one thing. If the chicken doesn't die, it means something else. So you might say, you know, if Fred over there is guilty, the chicken will die, and the chicken eats the poison and the chicken dies. That's a confirmation, but you need 3 confirmations in a row or 3 negations in a row for that to work. And so for the Azande, you might go through, I don't know, 12, 15 chickens before you end up with an answer. Fortunately, the poison doesn't go into the meat, so these chickens are edible. So it's basically, you're going to eat chicken for a while if something bad has happened to somebody. But if that person then is identified, they often are not aware that they did anything wrong. And they're going to go and have to blow on a chicken wing to cool their hearts. And they have to be careful from then on, because they're dangerous. It's like they're packing heat and they didn't realize it. It could go off at any time. What this means, though, is people are more likely to be accused of witchcraft if they're cranky, if they're in a bad mood, if they seem to be having negative thoughts about people all the time. And so E. Evans Pritchard said this can cause social control. Underline that, social control. We will hear this again. It makes people do what they do in the society. It makes people behave. And since people are behaving, it can cause benefits to the society to have a system set up like this. Let's see what my time is here. Better stop.